Oscar winner Gene Hackman, a known recluse in recent years, was seen in public. As we're learning incredible new details this hour about the circumstances surrounding his death. His front door open, scattered pills on the bathroom countertop, one dog dead in the closet, two still alive on the property. 95-year-old Hackman and his wife, a 63-year-old classical pianist, their German Shepherd dog, all of them tonight mysteriously dead. The police right now are ruling out a carbon monoxide leak. This frantic 911 call captured the moment they were found.
I don't have a lot of fears. I have the normal fear of passing away. You know, I guess we all think about.
Are they moving at all?
No, dude, they're not moving. Just send somebody out here really quick.
Okay, my units are on their way, okay?
Gene Hackman, a straight-up Hollywood icon, and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their tucked-away Santa Fe home. At first, folks thought it was just nature taking its course. He was 95, she was 65. But when forensics stepped in, things took a wild turn. This wasn't just some peaceful passing. Something real grim was going on. Fans were already grieving the loss of the Oscar-winning legend, but then came the confusion. The first theory? Carbon monoxide poisoning. But that got shut down quickly. And the fact that both of them died just days apart? Yeah, that had investigators raising eyebrows. A deep dive into the timeline only made things shadier. How did two folks still in decent health just drop like that? Was it just some tragic coincidence, or was something way more twisted behind it? In this video, we're breaking down the chilling evidence that points to foul play, digging into the strange details that don't sit right, and revealing who might have had a reason to want Gene Hackman gone. Gene, a two-time Academy Award winner and Hollywood heavyweight, spent his later years way off the radar. At 95, he was living that quiet life in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with Betsy, his wife of over 30 years. His people said he was at peace, still sharp in the mind, and loving life away from the flashing cameras. Every now and then, you might catch him around town, sometimes on his bike, sometimes grabbing a coffee, still holding on to that independent streak. But even with his age, nobody saw his sudden, shady passing coming. And now, folks are asking, what really happened? Betsy Arakawa, a classical pianist, had always been seen as the doting ride-or-die partner who held Gene down in his later years. While some folks close to them swore their love was strong, others couldn't ignore how much more cut off he'd become. Friends and even distant relatives started noticing. Gene wasn't easy to reach anymore. He barely showed face in public. And the whispers? Oh, they got loud. Word was Betsy kept a tight grip on who got access to him, screening calls and shutting out even his longtime Hollywood crew. Some chalked it up to a wife doing what she had to do, protecting her aging man. But others, they felt something was off. And the eerie timeline leading up to their deaths only made things messier. The biggest clue? Gene's pacemaker. That little device caught the exact moment his heart gave out, February 17, 2025. That meant by that day, Gene Hackman was already gone. But what about Betsy? Her timeline? Straight up hazy? Did she die right alongside him? Did she survive him by a few days? Or was she just sitting there, alone, trapped in a house with his lifeless body? The truth wouldn't come to light until February 26, 2025, 9 whole days later, when maintenance workers stumbled onto a real-life nightmare. They showed up at the Hackman house for a routine check, but something felt off from the jump. No sounds, no movement. The front door, unlocked. The whole place, creepy quiet. They called out, no answer. That's when they stepped inside. And what did they find? It sent Hollywood reeling. Gene Hackman's body, cold, lifeless, right there in the front mudroom. Still fully dressed, Gene's cane and sunglasses were right there, like he had just dropped where he stood. In another part of the house, Betsy Arakawa's body lay twisted on the bathroom floor. Her position all wrong. Unnatural. A space heater was knocked over beside her, and prescription pill bottles were scattered across the counter. The whole scene felt eerie, like death had crept in and caught them both off guard. But something wasn't adding up. Investigators rolled up expecting a simple case. Natural causes, nothing more. After all, Gene was 95. But the second they stepped inside, alarms went off. No forced entry, no signs of a fight, no clear cause of death, and yet the energy in that house? Office Gene's position pointed to a sudden collapse, while Betsy being found in another room suggested she didn't go at the same time. Then there was the family dog situation. 2 still alive, but 1 dead. It locked in a closet. And the real question? Who put it there? The first explanation police threw out was carbon monoxide poisoning. It made sense. Sudden deaths, no struggle, a quiet scene. But when they tested the air, the results came back clear. No gas leaks, no busted appliances, nothing that could have taken them both out without a trace. With that theory shot down, investigators were back at square one. Then things got even more unsettling. Maybe Gene's age played a role. Heart failure, something expected. But Betsy? She was only 65. No known health problems. So what really happened? There was no real reason why she would have died at the exact same time, or even days later, if she had survived past Jean's passing. So what went down in those 9 missing days? Why didn't anyone hear from her? And if she was still alive, why didn't she reach out for help? As investigators pieced things together, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't just some elderly couple peacefully passing in their sleep. Nah, there were too many gaps, too many things that just didn't sit right. What really went down in that house? Did Gene Hackman die naturally, or did someone make sure of it? And if foul play was involved, who stood to gain the most? That's when authorities started digging into motives, potential suspects, and the chilling possibility that Gene Hackman's death was no accident. When first responders pulled up to Gene's Santa Fe home, they thought they were walking into a routine case, an elderly couple gone peacefully. But the second they crossed that threshold, they knew this was something else. Gene Hackman's body was right there by the entryway, sprawled out on the floor, still fully dressed. His sunglasses were right beside him, his cane just inches away, like he had been about to step out when he suddenly dropped. The way he was positioned told a story. Like he had fallen mid-action, maybe reaching for the door, maybe trying to move deeper into the house. Given his age and history with heart trouble at first, authorities leaned toward a sudden cardiac event. But was it really that simple? But what did they find next? That's what really made them stop in their tracks. In another room, Betsy Arakawa's body was stretched out on the bathroom floor. Unlike Gene, she wasn't caught in mid-motion. She was lying still, curled on her side, right next to a toppled-over space heater. Looked like it had been knocked over in her last moments, maybe when she fell. On the bathroom counter, an open pill bottle sat there, pills scattered around it. But here's the thing, was she taking too many, or had they just spilled? Nobody could say for sure. And then there were the dogs. The couple had 3. 2 of them, still alive but clearly shaken, pacing through the house like they had been left alone for days. But the third, found dead, locked inside a closet. That raised a whole new set of questions. If Gene and Betsy had both gone suddenly, who locked that dog away? Did Betsy do it after Gene passed? Or was someone else in that house? On the surface, nothing screamed foul play. No busted locks, no broken windows, no signs of a fight. The house was untouched, too untouched. And that was strange. A home sitting empty for 9 days should have looked lived in, messy, neglected, rotting food, piled up mail, something out of place. But instead, the Hackman house looked almost maintained, like someone had been there.
The Oscar winner Gene Hackman, a known recluse in recent years, was seen in public. As we're learning incredible new details this hour about the circumstances surrounding his death. His front door open, scattered pills on the bathroom countertop, 1 dog dead in the closet, 2 still alive on the property. 95-year-old Hackman and his wife, a 63-year-old classical pianist, their German Shepherd dog, all of them tonight mysteriously dead. The police right now have ruling out a carbon monoxide leak. This frantic 911 call captured the moment they were found.
That's when authorities leaned into the most logical theory, carbon monoxide poisoning. It made sense. CO is a silent killer. No struggle, no warning, just slipping away. It could explain the peaceful deaths, the undisturbed house, even the panicked dogs. The carbon monoxide theory seemed solid until the test results came back clean. No trace of CO in the house, no gas leaks, no faulty appliances. Just like that, the most logical explanation was thrown out, leaving investigators with more questions than answers.
They're going to look at every aspect and try to figure out the exact cause. And I think the autopsy is going to be key, and the toxicology. But again, in my experience, that could take a while.
That's when things really stopped making sense. Gene was found near the door like he had been on his way out, but his pacemaker confirmed he had been dead for at least 9 days. If Betsy was still alive after he passed, why didn't she call for help? And that bathroom scene, the knocked over heater, the open pill bottle, it wasn't sitting right. Did she pass naturally? Did she take something? Or worse, was the whole setup staged to look that way? No signs of forced entry meant this wasn't some random break-in, but that didn't mean no one else had been inside. Investigators had to consider another angle. What if the person responsible didn't need to break in at all? What if it was someone they knew, someone they trusted enough to let in? And then came the timeline issue. Gene's pacemaker died on February 17th. If Betsy had been alive afterward, how many days did she spend alone? And why hadn't anyone heard from her? Sure, the couple wasn't super social, but no calls, no messages, no signs of life? If she was conscious after Gene's passing, why didn't she reach out to 911, a friend, a neighbor? Was she physically unable to? Or was something or someone keeping her from doing so? And then an even darker possibility crept in. What if Gene Hackman's death wasn't natural at all? What if Betsy had played a role and later suffered the same fate? Then there was that dead dog in the closet. That wasn't random. It hinted at something or someone being in that house before those bodies were found.
Are they moving at all?
No, dude, they're not moving. Just send somebody out here really quick.
Okay, my units are on their way, okay?
As forensic experts combed through the scene, the questions just kept stacking up. If this wasn't carbon monoxide and there was no sign of a break-in, then what in the world happened? Was this really just two tragic, natural deaths, or was somebody out here covering their tracks? Investigators knew they needed hard evidence, autopsy results, toxicology reports, and forensic tests on the bodies. But one thing was already clear: this wasn't your average case. Something went down in that house, and now the authorities were on a mission to get to the bottom of it. As they dug deeper into the strange and sudden deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, one critical question rose to the surface: who had something to gain? Gene and Betsy lived in privacy and luxury with an estate worth an estimated $80 million. And with no kids, Betsy, as Gene's wife and closest kin, had control of the bulk of their finances. But as investigators started pulling financial records, they found something that didn't sit right, something that hinted at a motive far more sinister. For years, Gene Hackman had put his trust and his money into the hands of a financial advisor. This advisor, whose name is being kept under wraps due to the ongoing investigation, had been managing Gene's assets and estate planning for over a decade. At first glance, Gene's financial records looked routine, until investigators spotted something that made their stomachs drop. Somebody had been moving serious money. Large withdrawals, millions at a time, had been pulled from one of Gene's investment accounts. And here's the kicker: these transactions weren't directly authorized by him. Even worse, the withdrawals had ramped up in the months leading to his death. Then came the most damning clue of all. On February 18th, 2025, just one day after Gene's pacemaker recorded his last heartbeat, that same financial advisor tried to access one of his main accounts. But when they went to move the money, they got shut down. The bank had locked the account, requiring personal verification from Gene himself, meaning whoever tried to pull those funds either thought Gene was still alive or had just realized he was gone. That's when investigators zeroed in on this so-called financial advisor. Records showed they had been fired just weeks before Gene's death. No official reason had been given, but sources close to the couple said Gene had been side-eyeing his finances. Had he caught on to some shady business? And if he did that get him killed? And then came another chilling detail. A neighbor who didn't think much of it at the time later recalled seeing a car parked outside the Hackman home on February 17th, the exact day Gene's pacemaker went silent. Security footage from the gated community's entrance backed up the neighbor's story. Somebody pulled up that night, stayed for nearly 2 hours, then dipped. The footage was grainy, the driver's face unclear, but the timing way too convenient to ignore. If this mystery visitor was the financial advisor or someone working for them, what really went down inside the Hackman home that night? One theory started taking shape. Gene might have confronted the advisor about the missing money, and things got heated. At 95, with a heart condition, even a high-stakes argument could have sent him over the edge. But was it just stress? Or had somebody made sure he wouldn't be around to tell his side of the story? And then there was Betsy. If she saw something, if she realized Gene didn't just drop dead on his own, was she taken out to keep her quiet? Her death was just as sketchy. The pills, the way her body was found, none of it sat right. Now, all eyes were on the financial advisor. They had motive, opportunity, and possibly even a physical presence at the crime scene. But was it enough to pin this as murder? Investigators knew they needed more, hard evidence. That's when they turned to forensics, looking for that one irrefutable clue. If the Hackmans had been taken out, there had to be something. Hidden in toxicology reports, digital footprints, or even on the bodies themselves. The truth was out there, and it was only a matter of time before it came to light. As forensic experts pieced together Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's final hours, they leaned on science to pull back the curtain on the truth. And at the heart of it all, a tiny device that had unknowingly recorded a key piece of evidence: Gene Hackman's pacemaker. This little machine, built to regulate his heartbeat, had also become a silent witness to his last moments. When investigators pulled the data, what they found was shocking. On February 17th, 2025, Gene's heart had stopped, just like that. No drawn-out distress, no signs of struggle. For a man his age with a heart condition, a sudden cardiac event wasn't unheard of. But here's where things got strange. There was nothing in his body suggesting stress, no clear trigger for his heart to just quit on him. That's when a chilling thought crossed investigators' minds. Had Gene Hackman been drugged? Suddenly, toxicology reports became the main focus, especially when it came to Betsy. And when the results dropped, they hit like a ton of bricks. Betsy had a sedative in her system, one commonly used for anxiety and sleep issues. Not unusual for someone her age, but the dosage? Way too high. Either she took too much, or someone made sure she did. That led to an even bigger question. Had Gene been given the same thing? Had he been drugged first, setting off his sudden collapse? The deeper investigators dug, the more it looked like this wasn't just a tragic coincidence, but a setup. Forensic accountants were now combing through Gene Hackman's financial records with a fine-tooth comb, and baby, the deeper they dug, the messier it got. Investigators had already caught someone trying to access his accounts after his death. But what about before? What kind of moves were being made in the weeks leading up to that fateful night? Had large sums of money mysteriously disappeared? Were there sudden changes to wills or financial agreements? And the biggest question of all, had Gene found out about something that put a target on his back? With every new forensic revelation, the case against the prime suspect was getting tighter. But one final piece of evidence was about to surface, something that could blow this whole case wide open. Because at this point, investigators were no longer looking at this as just two tragic natural deaths. There were too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions, and too many financial red flags pointing to something much darker lurking beneath the surface. Officials still hadn't outright called this a homicide, but let's just say they weren't ruling it out either. Now, all eyes were on the final toxicology reports, because if those results showed sedatives or any other substances in Gene Hackman's system, especially at levels that didn't match his medical history, that would be the smoking gun. And when the truth finally comes out, the world is going to find out exactly what happened inside that Santa Fe home. This could be the smoking gun investigators need to prove Gene Hackman was drugged before his death. And when it comes to Betsy, her toxicology results might reveal whether she willingly took those pills found beside her, or if someone made sure she had no choice. If forensic experts find evidence of an overdose or a suspicious cocktail of drugs, this case won't just be tragic, it'll be the blueprint of a cold, calculated crime. But here's where things get real shady. The prime suspect, the financial advisor who had been handling Gene's money for over a decade? Well, ever since investigators started sniffing around those shady withdrawals and failed attempts to access Gene's accounts, he's been playing hard to get. Authorities have tried multiple times to bring him in for questioning, but he won't talk. And of course, his legal team is out here swearing up and down that he did nothing wrong, claiming all transactions were routine and totally authorized. But let's be real, who's buying that? Investigators sure aren't, especially since those sketchy bank access attempts happened right after Gene's death, before the world even knew he was gone. Now the heat is on. Law enforcement is doubling down, building a case brick by brick. Financial forensic specialists are going deep into Gene's estate records, looking for any sign that his accounts were being drained before he passed. And it's not just Gene's money under the microscope. The suspect's own financial records are being dissected to see if any suspicious deposits or transfers magically appeared right after Gene died. Because if investigators can connect the dots, that's checkmate. But law enforcement isn't stopping there. They're combing through security footage and pulling phone records, searching for any evidence that might place the suspect near the Hackman home on the day Gene's pacemaker flatlined. Because the million-dollar question still looms, was this a carefully planned, cold-blooded act of murder? And if so, was Gene the only intended victim, or was Betsy collateral damage? Think about it. The suspect had direct financial ties to the couple. If Gene had started pulling at the threads of a financial scheme, if he had confronted the suspect about missing money, could that confrontation have sealed his fate? And what about Betsy? Did she see something she was never supposed to? Was she silenced to make sure the truth never saw the light of day? Right now, authorities are in a holding pattern, waiting for those final lab results. But one thing is clear. This case is looking less like a tragic coincidence and more like a cold, calculated crime. And if the forensic and financial evidence keeps pointing in the same direction, prosecutors might be gearing up to press charges. At this point, it's not a question of if something sinister happened. The only question left? Do they have enough proof to take down whoever's responsible? One thing's for sure, this is no longer just the story of a Hollywood icon's passing. It's a full-blown real-life murder mystery. And the ending? It's coming soon. Gene Hackman's daughter now whispers bone-chilling words, like she's peeling back the rotten layers of a legend that crumbled under his own ego. No dramatic tears, no heart-wrenching sorrow. Leslie Hackman's eerie, unsettling reaction doesn't just shake her already broken family, it sends chills through the public and turns hungry reporters into a swarm of bloodthirsty vultures. Gene Hackman took his last breath in a cold, tomb-like house filled with the stench of toxic gas, but the real shocker wasn't his death. It was the 2 decades of dead silence that cracked the second Leslie spoke. The daughter who once stayed hidden now steps into the light, not with grief, but with words so sharp they slice through a truth no one dared to face. Gene Hackman left behind millions, but what Leslie left behind was a nightmare that buried his legacy 6 feet deep. So, what's really lurking behind those cold eyes and unsettling words? What secret is Leslie Hackman keeping? Gene Hackman, the man who once ruled Hollywood with legendary performances in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Bonnie and Clyde, and Superman, was once everywhere. His face graced the covers of elite magazines, he owned the red carpet, bathed in applause, camera flashes, and wild parties that stretched till sunrise. But after 2004, poof, he vanished. No official retirement, no farewell speech, no red carpet goodbyes, Just silence. His name only popped up in tribute articles or nostalgia pieces about Hollywood's greatest. And as the years rolled on, that silence thickened, slowly erasing his own legend. Walking away from the glitz of Los Angeles, Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, 31 years his junior, slipped away to the quiet of Santa Fe, New Mexico, shutting out the world that once worshipped him. A sprawling $3.8 million estate tucked away in the shadow of grand, towering mountains. No star-studded parties, no prying paparazzi, just 2 people, 3 dogs, and endless afternoons swallowed by silence. Neighbors in Santa Fe barely caught a glimpse of Hackman. Every now and then, in the soft glow of early morning, someone might spot him, cup of coffee in hand, perched on the porch, eyes lost in the distant peaks. The once commanding lawman of the big screen had faded into a frail old man, his deep-set eyes holding secrets no one could read. His life now moved in slow motion, like an aging film reel stuck on repeat, each frame, each fleeting memory flickering behind closed eyes. Betsy Arakawa, the woman once met with suspicion by Hackman's entire family, turned out to be the one who never left. She cared for him like a seasoned nurse, tending to every meal, every pill, every fragile moment. But was that love real and pure? Or was Betsy more like that Santa Fe mansion, both a sanctuary and a prison, trapping Hackman in a loneliness he couldn't escape? Close friends who managed to visit said the man they once knew had vanished. He barely spoke, dodged any talk about his career, and refused to watch his own films. Any new scripts sent his way, Betsy shut them down without a second thought. In his final interview, Hackman admitted, "I haven't watched my own movies in years. They belong to the past, not to me." And from 2004 to 2024, a full 2 decades, he existed like a ghost, physically present but long gone from the world. No big events, no red carpets, not even a random sighting. The only time he was caught in public was in 2023. When paparazzi snapped a rare shot of him and Betsy at a small seafood joint. He looked frail, his frame smaller, clinging to Betsy for support with every step. But for just a moment, that stare, the same one that once sent shivers through Hollywood and the French Connection, flickered back to life. Neighbors said Hackman's house was always locked up tight, but late at night, hushed arguments sometimes slipped through the walls. No one knew what was being said, but Betsy's voice was always the last one heard. And there was something about that house, an energy that felt off, dark, heavy, like the ghosts of the past had never left. For 21 years, the world saw no trace of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. That eerie silence was like a velvet curtain dropping on the Legends era, while fueling endless conspiracy theories. Some whispered that Hackman fell into deep depression after stepping out of the spotlight. Others swore Betsy kept him locked away, cutting him off from the world to control his fortune. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. Hackman chose silence. It was almost like he wanted to erase himself from Hollywood's memory. But in this town, disappearing doesn't mean being forgotten. And yet, Hackman made sure of it. He shut down every interview request, rejected every honor, even turning his back on the Lifetime Achievement Oscar. People couldn't understand. How could a man who once gave his soul to the craft suddenly act like it never existed? That silence? It wasn't just strange, it was a warning. No one who spent 40 years in the blinding heat of fame simply vanishes without a trace. So what was he hiding? A buried family secret? A will that would shake Hollywood? Or wounds so deep, even his first wife, Faye Maltese, and his 3 children never knew? Then came the call. In the dead of night, Santa Fe police reported 2 lifeless bodies found in separate rooms. A dog mysteriously dead. And just like that, the 21-year silence shattered into a storm of questions no one was ready for. Gene Hackman, the icon who once ruled the silver screen, was now nothing more than a name on an autopsy report. The quiet before the storm? Turns out that was just the prologue to a story far darker, far more painful than anyone could have imagined. And when his daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, stood there clutching his will, the weight of it all finally broke her. The winding red dirt roads leading to that elite neighborhood on the outskirts of Santa Fe had always carried an air of eerie solitude. This wasn't the California sun, dazzling and golden. It wasn't the crisp, cool air of the East Coast either. Here, the light hung tired and heavy, like the whole sky was holding its breath, waiting for something to come crashing down. And under that weary glow, Gene Hackman's multi-million-dollar estate sat perched on a hill, staring out over the rolling mountains, holding onto secrets no one dared speak aloud. The people who lived near the Hackmans almost never saw them. No weekend wine tastings, no Sunday church visits, no strolls through the bustling farmer's market. When Gene and Betsy did step outside, it was fleeting, just distant shadows slipping behind the towering iron gates. Some said if you were up early enough, just as the sun hesitated behind the peaks, you'd catch a glimpse of Betsy, quietly leading the old dog out of the house like a ritual, like a routine hiding something far more sinister. She moved slowly, her eyes shifting nervously like she knew someone might be watching. The old dog trudged beside her, its steps heavy, almost as if it too could sense the tension swallowing the house whole. Less than 15 minutes later, Betsy led the dog back inside, shutting the gate with a careful, almost fearful touch, like even the smallest sound could wake the restless spirits trapped within those walls. Gene Hackman, ever since his heart began to fail him, barely set foot outside. The only visitor who crossed that threshold, aside from the Hackmans themselves, was the pharmacy delivery woman, a middle-aged figure, her face worn with struggle, who always muttered something under her breath as she left. One day, she leaned toward a nearby neighbor and whispered, "They're hiding something in there. Something big." No one really knew who Betsy Arakawa confided in, if she had anyone at all. She was a woman of few words, a shadow in her own home. But one elderly neighbor, just a fence away, had noticed something. Betsy spent a lot of time in the backyard making hushed phone calls. Her voice was barely more than a whisper, too soft for anyone to make out the full conversation. But sometimes, through the rustling trees, a few chilling fragments would slip through. "He's getting worse? No, we can't let anyone know. This house? It's not safe." And every time the calls would end the same way, with a weary sigh, as if Betsy carried the weight of the entire sky on her shoulders. Who was on the other end of the line? A family member? Or someone who held the deepest, darkest secrets of the Hackman household? No one could say for sure. But one thing was clear, those calls were happening more and more often. And after each one, Betsy's face seemed more drawn, more lined with the kind of worry that didn't just fade away. Gene Hackman's estate had once been hailed as a masterpiece of architecture, a stunning retreat nestled in the untamed beauty of nature. But for the rare few who had ever stepped inside, the truth was something else entirely. The house wasn't just cold. It wasn't the crisp chill of mountain air or the sleekness of modern design. No, this was something deeper, a quiet, suffocating cold, the kind that seeped into the walls, the kind that carried the weight of an unspeakable sorrow. Lining the walls were countless framed photographs, but something felt off. Not a single one featured Gene Hackman's 3 biological children. The faces of the kids who once ran barefoot through his Los Angeles backyard had been erased from his home as if they never existed. Instead, the frames held only carefully curated moments. Hackman and Betsy on their travels, staged smiles against postcard-perfect sunsets, holiday snapshots that felt hollow, missing the warmth of family. Hackman never publicly addressed his health, but whispers among the neighbors painted a grim picture. They believed he had battled a slew of ailments: heart disease, arthritis, spinal degeneration. But the most devastating sickness? It wasn't something a doctor could diagnose. It was the silent, crushing fate that had haunted Hollywood's greatest legends. Marlon Brando, Katharine Hepburn, Greta Garbo, titans of the screen, yet all met the same tragic end, fading into obscurity while still alive. For Hackman, a man who once was the box office, watching himself slowly vanish from relevance, mentioned only in retrospectives and nostalgia pieces, may have been the cruelest illness of all. In one rare conversation with a neighbor, Betsy let something slip. "Gene doesn't watch his old movies," she admitted. "He says they belong to a different life." That was how Gene Hackman severed the final thread, tying him to Hollywood, to the golden past that once defined him. But the truth? The truth lived in the quiet moments, the ones no one else saw. Every night when the house sank into silence, Betsy would catch glimpses of him, standing by the bedroom window, eyes locked on the distant mountains, murmuring under his breath. Those whispers weren't the wind. They weren't the echoes of an aging mind slipping away. No, they were something far more haunting. They were the unfinished conversations between Gene Hackman and the man he used to be. The man who once stood beneath the dazzling lights, who believed the glow of fame was eternal. But fame has no mercy. And when the doors closed, when the cameras stopped rolling, the lights of Hollywood flickered out, leaving behind only Gene Hackman, a man trapped in his own million-dollar fortress, a ghost in the house he once called home. And beyond those cold iron gates, past the walls that held his silence, the world moved on. No one remembered Gene Hackman, except for the whispers, the ones that had been waiting for their moment to become reality. That million-dollar house, perched in the New Mexico hills, had once concealed secret midnight calls and murmured fears. Now it was something else entirely, a crime scene, cold, lifeless. The red and blue flashes of police lights bounced off the terracotta walls, casting eerie shadows against the evening sky. Behind wooden fences, local residents stood frozen, their whispers barely audible as they tried to piece together the horror unfolding inside the house that had been silent for years. The police didn't kick down the door because of screams or a desperate call for help. No, it was the silence that led them there, an unnatural, suffocating quiet. It was the pharmacy delivery woman, the one with the weary eyes and the muttered warnings, who first noticed it. A smell, something indescribable, not quite death, not quite rotten, a grotesque fusion of chemicals and decay that clung to the air, thick and inescapable. When the officers finally stepped inside, they didn't find a scene of violence. No overturned furniture, no sign of a struggle, just an emptiness that felt heavier than bloodstains. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. Two bodies, two separate rooms, two different positions, but the same chilling fate. Gene Hackman lay still, his body resting as if sleep had simply overtaken him after a long, weary night. The blanket was pulled neatly up to his chest, his face eerily peaceful, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. No bruises, no struggle, just the quiet finality of a man who had taken his last breath. A few steps away in the dim light of the next room, Betsy Arakawa's lifeless form was crumpled beside the bed. Her stiff fingers clutched the landline phone, one of the last remnants of their old life before they disappeared into seclusion. The screen showed no outgoing calls. Had she tried to dial for help? Had she sensed something was terribly wrong? Or had she been the first to realize that whatever haunted this house had finally come for them? Then there were the dogs, the three faithful companions who had lived with Gene and Betsy for years. When officers entered the home, two were still alive, trembling beside their owners' bodies, their eyes filled with something deeper than fear, something resembling grief. But the oldest dog, the one Betsy walked every morning before sunrise, lay motionless in the hallway between the bedrooms. No blood, no signs of trauma, no struggle, just stillness, as if, like its owners, it had simply faded away. So why did two dogs survive while one perished? Was the gas not strong enough to take them all? Or did something happen before the fumes spread? Something deliberate? A tragic coincidence? Or a calculated move? Investigators wasted no time. The forensic team tore through the house, inspecting the heating system, gas lines, and every possible source of contamination. If this was an accident, there had to be a cause, but what they found sent a chill down the spines of even the most seasoned professionals. Nothing. No carbon monoxide leak, no faulty gas stove left on, no short-circuited electrical system. Whatever toxic fumes had filled that house, it didn't belong there. Then came the final report, and when the results came in, the room fell silent. Hydrogen sulfide, a lethal gas nearly impossible to detect in small amounts, except for its faint rotten egg stench. A gas so deadly that even brief exposure could shut a body down. But here was the real mystery. It hadn't come from the house itself. It wasn't leaking from the pipes. It wasn't seeping from the sewers. So where did it come from? And more importantly, who put it there? So was the gas leaked into the house from an outside source? Or even more chilling, was it released from within? Gene Hackman's body showed no signs of trauma, no bruises, no struggle, just a man who had gone to sleep and never woken up. Betsy Arakawa, same story. Except for one crucial detail, she died clutching the phone, as if in the middle of a desperate call. A tragic accident? A simple gas leak? If so, why did the forensic team detect traces of a chemical that didn't belong in the house? The deeper investigators dug, the murkier things became. Who died first? Gene or Betsy? Who realized the danger first? Who was Betsy trying to call? And if this was murder, what kind of cold-blooded mind could carry out such a calculated act? The cruelest twist? Gene Hackman's children had always braced themselves for the inevitable. Their father was 94, his passing was only a matter of time. But no one expected it to happen like this. And no one expected Betsy, his wife, 30 years younger, to go with him. She should have been the one making the funeral arrangements. Now the question loomed, had they even written a will? If so, was it together or separate? And more importantly, who stood to gain from it? No one knew what Gene and Betsy whispered to each other in their last days. Were Betsy's hushed phone calls tied to the invisible gas? Or was she just another pawn in a scheme set in motion long ago? As their lifeless bodies disappeared beneath white sheets, the million-dollar house returned to silence. But this time, there was no one left to guard its secrets. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's funeral mirrored the solitude of their final years. No flashing cameras, no media circus, just a handful of close relatives. But beneath that quiet farewell, something sinister lurked. Side eyes, muted whispers, suspicious glances exchanged between people who were supposed to be family. Losing both Gene and Betsy at once was already a shock, but that was nothing compared to the bombshell that dropped when Gene's personal lawyer stepped forward. The will had been updated, and not just years ago, no, it had been changed just months before their deaths. And that single uncertainty threw the entire will into chaos. If Betsy had outlived Gene, even by mere minutes, her 40% would have legally transferred to her estate or next of kin. But if Gene had been the last to take his final breath, his assets would be distributed exactly as the will dictated. The problem? There was no clear evidence to prove either scenario. The medical examiner couldn't establish the precise time of death for both. The gas poisoning had clouded everything, making it impossible to determine who died first. And without that key detail, the inheritance became a legal minefield, open to challenges, disputes, and most dangerously, accusations. Gene's children were already fuming over their reduced share, feeling sidelined in favor of Betsy. But with her gone too, the money meant for her was now in limbo. Would it revert back to Jean's estate? Would Betsy's side of the family fight for it? And what about that mysterious 30% locked away in a trust? Its true beneficiary hidden for a decade? The reading of the will didn't provide answers. It only raised more questions. And one thing became clear. Gene Hackman's legacy wasn't just a Hollywood legend. Under New Mexico's inheritance law, if they can't prove who passed first, the assets get handled like they died at the same time. That meant Gene's money set aside for Betsy wasn't going straight to her people. It was rolling right back into Gene's shared estate. His 3 biological kids, who were only supposed to get 20%, were now staring down the chance to snatch up Betsy's assets too, even though they never truly saw her as family. Just like that, Betsy was erased from her own husband's will. At the funeral, they kept quiet, but the second that lawyer's office door clicked shut, all that bottled-up tension exploded like a ticking time bomb. Leslie Hackman, Gene's eldest, broke the silence first. Her voice shook, though nobody could tell if it was from sadness or straight-up rage. Betsy was never our mother. Don't make us fake this little happy family act. David, the second son, let out a cold laugh. 40% of the estate to a woman who didn't even give him a kid, while his real children barely get a fourth? All those years of stiff, awkward dinners, and Betsy trying and failing to break through to Gene's kids, came flooding back in an instant. To Leslie and David, Betsy was just the lucky woman who walked into Gene's life when he was already sitting on fame and fortune. But to Gene, Betsy was the one who stayed when Hollywood packed up and left him behind. The real question, did Gene trust Betsy fully, or was that cold? Will his way of hiding his own end-of-life doubts? When they started digging through his assets, a string of anonymous investment accounts popped up. Turns out Gene Hackman, a man who never once showed public interest in crypto, had serious money tied up in tech companies dealing with artificial intelligence and biological data. And here's the kicker. Just weeks before he passed, Gene wired nearly $2 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Why would a legendary actor staring down the end of his life start making shady money moves like that? After leaving the lawyer's office, Leslie sat frozen in the car, silent, tears streaming down her face, unstoppable. It wasn't just the loss of her father that had Leslie in tears. It was the ugly truth unraveling right in front of her. The man she once put on a pedestal, the father she thought she knew, had been exposed in the harshest way. He wasn't just a loving dad. He was a man who played the game, always calculating. Hidden money, secret deals, shady transactions, all of it painted a picture of a Gene Hackman she never imagined. The same man who used to curl up on the couch watching movies with her every night had lived a whole different life in the shadows. Maybe we never really knew him, Leslie whispered. That $1 million inheritance wasn't some glue holding the family together. It was a blade, slicing through whatever was left of their fragile bond. A fortune big enough to change lives, but all it did was tear them apart. Gene Hackman had once been a guaranteed box office hit. He wasn't the heartthrob leading man with a chiseled jawline, nor did he ooze that effortless sex appeal like the Hollywood icons of his time. Hackman was something different, something Hollywood's golden era was always chasing. Strong, rugged, with a presence so raw it felt like he wasn't just acting. He was swallowing every scene while making it part of him. He stood tall in the golden age of the 70s and 80s like an uncrowned king. From The French Connection and Mississippi Burning to Unforgiven, Hackman didn't just act, he became something bigger, a symbol of the old school, rough-around-the-edges American man who refused to break. In Gene Hackman, people saw the wrinkles of a fading era, the slow death of the American dream, and the quiet suffering of those the world had left behind. And in the end, he became one of them. In 2004, Gene Hackman called it quits. No grand farewell, no big Hollywood send-off, no final blockbuster to cement his legacy. He vanished, stepping away from the screen, blaming health issues. But everybody knew that was just the surface. The truth? Hollywood didn't have room for Gene Hackman anymore. The rugged, no-nonsense actors who defined an era when real scripts and real performances mattered had been pushed aside. The industry he once helped shape had morphed into a cash machine, where fresh-faced stars, superhero franchises, and CGI spectacles chewed up and spit out everything old school. Nobody called Hackman anymore. The same producers and directors who once begged him to sign contracts had now erased his name like some faded, outdated memory. Gene Hackman didn't retire, Hollywood retired him. After stepping away from the big screen, Hackman and Betsy packed up and moved to New Mexico, far from the flashing cameras, the endless parties, and the glittering red carpets. People couldn't help but wonder, why would a legend like Gene Hackman choose to spend his last years out there? The answer was simple and painful. In Hollywood, he wasn't wanted. In New Mexico, he wasn't recognized. That $1 million mansion in the middle of the desert, it was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, but turned into a windowless prison. Hackman and Betsy lived quietly, cut off from the world. The interview requests slowed down, then stopped completely. No invitations to awards shows, no lifetime achievement honors. Like Hollywood had made a collective decision to erase his name from history. Gene Hackman spent his last years as a ghost king, the forgotten ruler of a kingdom that had once bowed at his feet but now acted like he had never existed. The cruelest thing about Gene Hackman's story? His final, greatest role never made it to the screen. No script, no director, no stage lights, just four walls, a couple of old dogs, and a wife watching the slow, painful decline of the man she loved. But one thing about Hackman, he was never scared of death. He once said, "If I end up dying alone one day, I won't be shocked. That's just the price of living too long in the spotlight." But his death wasn't just the end of a man, it was a sentence, a brutal punishment Hollywood handed down to those who dared to get old, dared to stand their ground, dared to be themselves. Gene Hackman didn't pass from old age or illness. Hollywood had already buried him long before. Once upon a time, Hollywood loved Gene Hackman, loved him the way people flocked to a box office smash. But that love, it was as flimsy as a discount matinee ticket. The second Hackman stopped bringing in money, stopped collecting Oscars, stopped giving juicy interviews, that love vanished, like it was never even real. Hollywood's love for Hackman was the worst kind. The kind that only sticks around when you're useful, then tosses you aside when you become dead weight. And Gene Hackman wasn't the only one, just another name on the long list of icons who once lit up Hollywood's sky, only to be tossed into the dark. Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia himself, faded away in silence, barely noticed. Burt Reynolds went from being a sex symbol to an old man struggling to make ends meet. Mickey Rourke, a Hollywood misfit who clawed his way back after years of being tossed aside. But Gene Hackman, he carried the weight of a whole generation. The actors who put their souls into their craft, who refused to fit into Hollywood's shiny plastic mold, who dared to grow old naturally. His death wasn't just a personal loss for his family or a sad day for movie lovers. It was a judgment on Hollywood itself. An industry that once built up legends only to crush and discard them the moment they stopped bringing in money. Betsy, in her final call to a relative, said it best. Gene always knew who he was. It was Hollywood that forgot. The verdict on Gene Hackman had been written long before, but his passing was the last chapter. Hollywood didn't take him out in one fell swoop. It did it slowly, with silence, with neglect, with the kind of cheap, conditional love that a fallen king gets when his throne is gone. Gene Hackman passed on a gray, quiet afternoon. No headlines, no grand send-off. The news of his death was as muted as the last years of his life, spent in the desert of New Mexico, a place where nobody bothered to look up his name anymore. No national memorial, no crowds gathering at his doorstep to leave flowers or light candles. Just a handful of short news blurbs, a few surface-level career recaps, and that was it. Gene Hackman was once a legend, but when the final curtain dropped, he became just another forgotten name, gathering dust in the public's memory. Buried deep in stacks of legal documents, tax forms, and his final will, people uncovered fragments of a life never fully told. Hackman's will didn't just divide up his million-dollar fortune, it raised serious questions about what he had been keeping under wraps for years. Mysterious assets, unnamed investments, offshore transactions so tangled that even his own private lawyer couldn't make sense of them. Why would a man who once spoke out against tax-dodging millionaires be caught up in shady financial dealings overseas? And why, in his final days, was he constantly making changes to his will, cutting out certain relatives, adding in unfamiliar names, even leaving strange amounts of money to an anonymous nonprofit with no clear ties to him? Gene Hackman left this world, but in his wake, he left a trail of unanswered mysteries. At first, his death was ruled as natural causes, old age and complications from chronic heart disease. But then, whispers started spreading. A handful of local newspapers in New Mexico began floating a chilling theory. Traces of toxic gas found inside Hackman's home. A trace amount of carbon monoxide was found in the mansion's aging ventilation system, just enough to wear him down, cause confusion, and drain his health little by little. But here's the strange part. That same system had been inspected just months before Gene Hackman's sudden passing, and back then, there wasn't a single sign of a leak. So was this just some freak accident? Or did somebody turn that million-dollar mansion into a silent death trap on purpose? And more importantly, was Hackman's hidden fortune somehow connected to his mysterious death? The local police opened an investigation. But once Hollywood stopped caring, everything went quiet. No big headlines, no national outcry, just silence. Leslie broke down in front of the cameras, not just over losing her father, but because she felt blindsided, betrayed. She thought that after years of distance, she and Hackman had finally made peace. But his final will, cold, calculated, and completely unrecognizable, told a different story. When a legend falls, it ain't just tears that drop. It's blood, betrayal, and wounds that never heal. If Hollywood was a house, then Gene Hackman laid down every brick. But when he was gone, Hollywood didn't even flinch. No grand tribute, no special festival to celebrate his legacy. And the worst part? Some of these young industry folks had the nerve to ask, Who is Gene Hackman? That's Hollywood for you, where the line between glory and being forgotten is razor thin. The same people who once called Hackman a living legend, now they've moved on, chasing after the next fresh face, the next bankable star. Gene Hackman, once Hollywood's uncrowned king, died a stranger in the very kingdom he helped build. They didn't need him anymore. His death wasn't a headline. It was just another footnote buried under a flood of gossip and clickbait. And those tapes, the ones that could change everything, they never saw the light of day. The Hackman family stayed quiet. The media moved on. And Gene Hackman's secrets were buried with him, at least until someone bold or ruthless enough decided to dig them up. One day, those recordings might leak, and when they do, the world will see that Gene Hackman didn't just die from old age, he died under the weight of the shadows that followed him his whole life. But that day ain't here yet. The curtain has dropped. Gene Hackman, the betrayed king, is now just another ghost wandering through Hollywood's past. He left this world, taking his secrets to the grave. And that million-dollar empire he built? It wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. A curse that left the ones he left behind drowning in suspicion, pain, and a family that may never heal.
Right now at 11 a.m., breaking news in the death of legendary actor Gene Hackman. ABC News has obtained the search warrant for his New Mexico home. We'll tell you what authorities found when they arrived.
Bodies of the Hollywood legend and his wife, Betsy, were discovered in their New Mexico home.
Hollywood was rocked to its core. When the FBI pulled up on Gene Hackman's $4 million mansion, they weren't ready for what they found. A chilling secret buried right beneath his estate. A hidden tunnel shrouded in mystery. What really went down? Were Gene Hackman and his wife's deaths just an unfortunate tragedy? Or is there something way darker lurking beneath the surface? Let's break it all down. Right now, at 11 a.m., the world is still trying to wrap its head around the latest twists in the shocking death of the legendary Gene Hackman. Fresh off the press from ABC News, authorities just got the green light to search Gene Hackman's $4 million mansion out in New Mexico. But what did they find inside? That took this whole case to a level nobody saw coming. The moment FBI agents stepped foot in that lavish estate, they knew something was off. The eerie traces left behind weren't just the usual signs of an accident or a natural passing. Nah, this was something way more unsettling. But the real jaw-dropper? That came when they stumbled upon a hidden passage buried deep beneath the estate. A tunnel that wasn't in a single blueprint, leading straight down into a dark, musty space full of unanswered questions. As the agents made their way down the old, creaking steps, their flashlights cut through the heavy darkness, bouncing off cold stone walls. And what did they see next? Everybody was speechless. Right beneath the glitz and glam of a Hollywood icon's mansion sat a secret warehouse, packed with strange, long-forgotten relics that seemed frozen in time. Dusty old wooden crates were piled high, casting eerie shadows like something straight out of a horror flick. Some were falling apart with age, while others sat untouched, sealed up tight like they hadn't been opened in decades. When one agent cautiously reached for a crate and pried the lid open, what they found inside sucked all the air out of the room. Silence, thick and heavy. Inside were aged, yellowed photographs, faces frozen in time, unfamiliar, almost otherworldly, like they belonged to a past no one ever spoke about. Some of the photos captured secret meetings, shadowy locations, and people whose identities remain a mystery. Alongside them were old files, bound together with worn leather straps, the pages darkened with time, covered in hurried, scribbled notes detailing events no one ever saw coming. In another crate, agents uncovered a collection of personal belongings, a vintage pocket watch, a few pieces of jewelry, and a small, weathered notebook filled with handwritten entries. The words inside? They read like confessions or memories of something major. But that wasn't even the wildest part. As their flashlights cut through the darkness, something else emerged. A heavy iron door lurking in the shadows. No handle, just a thick, rusted lock, untouched for who knows how long. Something or someone was sealed away behind that door. But what? Could this be the key to uncovering what really happened to Gene Hackman and his wife? Or are we looking at something even darker? Something the authorities don't want the world to know? The FBI isn't saying much, keeping everything on lockdown, but that hasn't stopped the rumors from spreading like wildfire. Some think the tunnel could be part of a hidden underground network, a secret world lurking beneath the surface. Others believe it holds evidence of a long-buried conspiracy, one that's been kept quiet for decades. Whatever the truth may be, one thing's for sure. This mystery is just getting started. In a dusty old crate, the agents uncover a set of bizarre tools. Some look like they belong to a master craftsman, while others, they give off a whole different vibe, like they were used for experiments nobody was meant to know about. The agents exchange uneasy glances. What in the world was really happening down here? As they search further, something even stranger comes to light. Odd markings carved into the walls, mysterious symbols scattered across the floor. The air grows heavier with every discovery. Were these just forgotten remnants of Hackman's past? Or were they clues to something far more sinister? Something lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be exposed. Every strange item they uncover only fuels wilder theories about what Gene Hackman might have been hiding. But the real answers? They might be buried deep within that tunnel, a passageway that could unlock a secret the whole world is desperate to uncover. As investigators work tirelessly, connecting scattered clues like pieces of a puzzle, the public waits on edge, hanging on to every new twist, hoping to finally drag the truth out of the shadows. Hackman's estate has always been known for more than just its multi-million-dollar price tag. It carries a reputation, a certain eerie mystique that now feels more real than ever. Tucked away in a secluded area, wrapped in towering walls and locked behind massive gates, Gene Hackman's mansion was more than just a home. It was a fortress where wealth and secrecy went hand in hand. Every inch of the estate, from the perfectly trimmed gardens to the opulent rooms, added to its aura of power and exclusivity. But beneath all that grandeur lurked a shocking truth, a hidden underground tunnel. Its discovery has set off a firestorm of speculation. Was it a secret escape route built for emergencies? Or was it designed to stash away classified documents and priceless valuables? This tunnel doesn't just raise questions about the mansion itself, it casts a whole new light on the enigma that was Gene Hackman's life. What's even more unsettling is the level of precision in the mansion's design. Every detail, every layer of security feels intentional, almost like it was built to keep something hidden from the world. With each new clue uncovered, the estate transforms into a labyrinth of secrets, pulling the public deeper into a mystery that only seems to grow. But the real shocker? The tunnel wasn't just some random discovery. The FBI stumbled upon it while digging into the suspicious circumstances of Hackman's recent death. How could a secret passage like this stay hidden for so long, right under everyone's nose? Early reports suggest the tunnel isn't new. It might have been built decades ago, possibly for a purpose no one has uncovered yet. Some believe it leads to a hidden underground safe room, while others suspect it stretches far beyond the estate, connecting to nearby homes. As agents push deeper into the unknown, the eerie symbols carved into the walls seem to whisper an untold truth, one that refuses to stay buried. What was Hackman hiding beneath his estate? Was this a vault of classified evidence tied to a secret project, or just the indulgence of a wealthy man who enjoyed the thrill of having his own underground escape? One thing's for sure, every new discovery only deepens the mystery, keeping the world hooked and desperate for answers hidden behind that heavy iron gate. Where does this all lead? Only time will tell. Early reports hint that the tunnel was built years ago, possibly for a specific reason. Some say it was just a private escape route, a way for Hackman to guard his privacy. But the wilder theories? They claim it leads to a secret safe room buried deep underground, holding secrets no one was ever meant to find. Some even suspect the tunnel stretches beyond Hackman's estate, possibly linking to nearby homes, hinting at a hidden underground network that's been kept secret for years. But the mystery doesn't stop there. As investigators dig deeper, they stumble upon a growing collection of eerie clues. Old documents, strange unidentified devices, and most intriguingly, cryptic symbols etched into the walls. One agent describes them as part of an unsolved cryptographic system, something far beyond simple markings. That raises even bigger questions. Was Hackman sitting on top of classified evidence tied to a hidden project? Or was this just the extravagant hobby of a man who enjoyed the thrill of owning his own underground lair? Investigators are now combing through property records, trying to figure out if local builders or even past owners knew about the tunnel's existence before now. Some longtime residents have eerie tales to tell, stories of workers who mysteriously vanished after working on Hackman's mansion. Others brush it off, saying the tunnel was just an old-school escape route, built as part of a high-security design from back in the day. But as public curiosity grows, so do the wild theories. Rumors are spreading like wildfire. Some claim Hackman stashed away a secret fortune down there, while others whisper about shady underground dealings that may have gone unnoticed for years. Whether this tunnel is just a forgotten relic or the missing piece in a much bigger puzzle, one thing is clear. The discovery has ignited an investigation unlike anything we've seen before. The revelation of a hidden tunnel beneath Gene Hackman's mansion has sent shockwaves through the public, especially given the strange and unsettling circumstances surrounding the deaths of Hackman and his wife, Betsy. As investigators push further into the case, more and more people are starting to ask the big question: could this tunnel hold the key to what really happened in their final days? Hackman's mysterious passing and the odd details surrounding it only make the tunnel's existence feel even more suspicious. Some believe it was more than just an underground passage. It may have been a secret escape route, a way for someone to slip out of the mansion unnoticed, or worse, sneak in. But the real question is, who needed that escape route? And for what reason? As agents sift through the strange artifacts buried within the tunnel, they're searching for anything that could shed light on what really happened to Hackman and Betsy. The old documents, faded photographs, and bizarre objects might hold the key to exposing a side of Hackman the world never knew. And And then there are the symbols, etched deep into the walls, whispering of a hidden past, possibly tied to secret dealings or relationships never meant to see the light of day. With the mystery unraveling, Hackman's old neighbors and friends are starting to talk. Each memory, each recollection adds another layer to the story. Some recall cryptic conversations, moments when Hackman hinted at troubles he never fully explained, signs that maybe, just maybe, he knew something was coming. Some remember strange visitors, people who came and went under the cover of darkness, slipping in and out of the mansion like ghosts. It left neighbors wondering what secrets were buried behind those towering walls. As the investigation pushes forward, one question looms over it all. How does this tunnel connect to the suspicious deaths of Hackman and his wife? Every new clue has the power to crack the case wide open or bury the truth even deeper. The world is watching, hungry for answers, desperate to uncover the final secrets of Gene Hackman, a man who took so much mystery with him to the grave. But with authorities staying tight-lipped, refusing to confirm or deny anything, the silence is only adding fuel to the fire, sending rumors into overdrive. The eerie tunnels, cryptic symbols, and strange artifacts hidden beneath Gene Hackman's estate should have been the key to unlocking the truth. Instead, they only led to more questions. Questions the authorities refused to answer. Every official statement was short, vague, like a puzzle missing half its pieces. The FBI combed through every inch of the underground passageways, turning over every stone. But whatever they found, they weren't sharing. The public, hungry for answers, was met with nothing but silence. The weight of the unknown only grew heavier, and the biggest question of all still lingers in the air. What was this tunnel really built for? Who walked through that tunnel? What secrets are buried beneath the mansion? The silence from authorities is starting to feel less like caution and more like confirmation. Confirmation that something much bigger is at play. Neighbors swear they saw strange visitors slipping in and out of the estate under the cover of darkness. Whispers of vanished workers have only added more fuel to the fire, turning this real-life mystery into something straight out of a Hollywood thriller. And on social media, the theories are running wild, some grounded in logic, others spiraling into full-blown conspiracy. But with officials refusing to confirm or deny anything, the public is left in the dark, filling the silence with their own speculations. And the more they dig, the deeper this mystery seems to go. With each passing day, this story twists and turns, becoming even harder to untangle. The evidence collected could be the key to finally unlocking a long-buried truth, or it could drag the mystery even deeper into the shadows. One thing is certain, though. Every eye is locked on the Hackman estate, waiting for the moment the wall of secrecy finally crumbles, exposing whatever has been hidden beneath that cold, unforgiving ground. Among the eerie discoveries, old, dust-covered phones with shattered screens, still holding onto unread messages that could contain secret conversations, hidden deals, or warnings that were never sent in time. A crumpled planner, packed with scribbled dates and cryptic notes, could be the missing timeline to an untold story. Meetings with unknown figures, locations that don't exist on any map. Then there are the vials. Strange, out of place, stirring up wild speculation. Were they part of a secret treatment, an experimental drug, or something even darker? Some remain sealed, untouched. Others have been used, but by who and for what purpose? Each item feels like a piece of a much bigger puzzle, a story deliberately buried. And the deeper investigators dig, the clearer it becomes. Someone went to great lengths to make sure the truth never came to light. Those broken phones, they might hold more than just old messages. They could contain hidden contact lists, leading straight to secret meetings, or even the masterminds pulling the strings behind the scenes. And those messy notebook scribbles, they're more than random thoughts. They could be coded messages, urgent instructions, or hastily written plans, details someone didn't want to forget. Then there are the vials. Were they just part of a medical routine, or were they tied to something illegal? Did they hold banned substances, untested pharmaceuticals, or something even more sinister? Investigators aren't leaving anything to chance. They're analyzing every detail, the dates on those messages, the handwriting in the notebooks, even the faint fingerprints left behind on each item. Forensic tests are already underway, searching for DNA or any trace of evidence that could finally connect these mysterious pieces to a name that could blow this whole case wide open. Every tiny clue